Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
So she said that you were going to promote something on Tuesday?
She mentioned that.
We do have a radical self-care masterclass, a free class that we're offering Monday at noon Arizona time and Tuesday at 5 p.m. Arizona time. And we'll provide you guys with the link if you want to register for that. But it'll be Michelle and myself hosting that. And we're going to talk about radical self-care and how mindful eating can fit into that paradigm and how to better nurture and care for yourself. So we'll be doing that Monday and Tuesday. You can also go to my website, which is inspiritusyoga.com. So spirit, right? usyoga.com. And then also amihungry.com. Those are the websites.
Hello and welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Karen W. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're welcoming back Dawn Hopkins to the podcast. Dawn was my yoga instructor when I went through yoga teacher trainings, and she's the founder and president of Inspiritus Yoga, Holistic Wellness and Training Centers, an international yoga school and continuing education provider with training centers in Phoenix, Detroit, and is that Canada?
Yes, Saskatchewan.
Wow. She's also the co-founder of the Retreat Ladies, Inspired Wellness Journeys, provider of yoga and wellness retreats with programs designed to help women heal and recover from the stress and demands of daily life. So thanks for coming back to the podcast, Dawn.
Thanks for inviting me back. I love being on here with you.
Yeah,
we love it. So I listened to the 2-part podcast you did with Jan on her Hope After Breast Cancer podcast, and it was on the Am I Hungry program and retreat that's coming up that we'll talk about in a little bit. And it's based on a book and a program called Am I Hungry? And that was written by Michelle May. Well, I think I met at that. Didn't we do the EMDR with horses? I think she was at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, she was.
Yeah. And I know I can sometimes use food for stress relief on days I work from home. It's all too easy to get focused on, using food for comfort. So you can give us some background into how you got involved in this program?
Absolutely. So this goes back a long ways for me. Back when I was in high school and college, I struggled with an eating disorder. And by the grace of God, I was able to heal from that over time. And I really thought that I had it nailed, like I had it under control. When I met Michelle May, I owned a Curves gym in Ahwatukee, and I was introduced to her by a common friend who knew that we were both trying to help people with their health and wellness journeys. And Michelle had designed and developed the Am I Hungry Mindful Eating program at that point. So I brought her in to really understand the nuts and bolts of the program. I knew diets didn't work, and I didn't want to be recommending diets to my then members of my gym. And so I sat through the program really to get a better understanding of the program at her invitation, not realizing that she knew enough about me to know that I needed to be there for myself. And so I went through her 8-week program with the intention of just gathering information to see if it would be a good fit for something I could refer my members to, and discovered that I still had the remnants of my eating disorder very much at play. And I had become kind of a chronic restrictive eater without even realizing it, where I was watching my calorie count and still continuing to think of food as good or bad. I was exercising to overcompensate if I ate something quote unquote bad. And I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that I still had layers of healing to do around this. And it helped me tremendously. So when she developed the facilitator training program in 2006, I went through it as one of the first facilitators ever and have been doing that work ever since. It really has helped me in ways I can't even begin to explain in terms of healing my relationship with food and my body, and being able to participate in the healing journey of others has just been incredibly rewarding to just see people come out of this dysfunctional relationship with food or chronic dieting, on and off of dieting, or off and on with overeating, and to develop a more holistic relationship with food. And I also am so honored that I was invited to co-develop the mindful eating and yoga program for Michelle May and the Am I Hungry program back in 2018. So I've been able to really lend my expertise in addition to being able to help others who are interested in combining mindful eating and yoga. So it's been an incredible journey, and I'm just so grateful for this work and what it has done for me and my clients and friends.
Yeah, I love how that all goes together. And that's what I was thinking as you were talking about it all. It's like, it makes sense that bringing mindfulness into everything you do, like, even your eating.
Yeah, definitely.
Instead of thinking, I just like how you explained everything. And when I was listening to it about not labeling food as good and bad and just being really mindful of how your body feels and, really getting in touch with all that.
Yeah. And I think as abuse survivors, we definitely need to be more in tune with our bodies. So I can't wait to hear more about this. So welcome back to the show, Dawn.
Thank you.
So being aware of the mind, body, spirit connection is so important to all aspects of our lives. Can you share the circle diagram you shared on the podcast with Jan that has some good questions to ask ourselves when we sit down and eat a meal?
Yeah. So the diagram is really called a food cycle, or the eating cycle. And we look at it from three different perspectives. So we look at it from the mindful eating perspective, from the restrictive eating perspective, and also from an overeating perspective. And we start with why we even eat in the first place. I think that's one of the things that different programs get wrong, is they're not addressing why we even eat in the first place. Then we move on to when to eat. And in mindful eating, it's really allowing hunger and physical signs and symptoms of hunger to determine when we want to eat. Now, that's not to say that there aren't going to be times where we eat for other reasons, of course, but within the mindful eating context, we're wanting to let hunger be the driver as much as possible. And then using some of the other reasons that we eat and addressing those in a more holistic way. For example, if we're eating because of emotions, or we're eating because of the environment that we're in and there's just food around, which I know we'll talk about later, or just things that are happening in our bodies that might confuse us into thinking that we're hungry. So we move into the when decision point. Then we ask the question, what do I want to eat? And in mindful eating, we're looking at balancing eating for pleasure with eating for nourishment. So it's not just strictly for nourishment that enables us to feel satisfied at the end of a meal, right? It's also enjoying the food that we eat and bringing into consideration the fact that we also eat for pleasure. I always laugh and I say, if we weren't meant to enjoy food, God wouldn't have made it taste so good.
Right.
So,
right. For a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then we move into the decision point of how we eat. And so within mindful eating, we want to eat in a way that's mindful, where we're present and we're not distracted and doing other things while we eat. And we're really focusing on the food and enjoying the food and making that experience as enjoyable as possible. Then we ask the question, how much? Like, when do I stop eating? Letting the body decide when it's had enough food to eat. And we have a lot of different ways that the body will signal to us that it's had enough, that we're satisfied. And then moving into the decision point of where to expend our energy. Like, where do we use the fuel that we gain from the food that we eat? Do we use it to ruminate about food, to feel guilty and shameful about food, to worry about our next meal and planning our next meal, which would be some of the other eating cycles? Or within mindful eating, it's just living the vibrant life that God designed us to live. So that's all the different decision points that oftentimes are unconscious to us. So we're bringing consciousness and awareness to each of those decision points within the eating cycle and allowing hunger to primarily be the driver.
Yeah. Makes so much sense.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Because I usually just eat when I'm hungry and try to eat super healthy. Sometimes I enjoy food, but not for the most part. Kind of
That's why I
strange.
feel like there needs to be a balance of, like you want to eat foods that are nourishing your body, but then, I have a sweet tooth. So then I want something a little sweet, too. And so, yeah, I think that God did give us the taste buds so that we can enjoy our food too. And then when we're really in tune to it, I just think it all makes sense when you really play it all out. Everything you said to me just totally makes sense. And you talk about how being food suggestive can drive us to emotionally eat, and our environment playing into that as well. Can you expound on that?
Sure. Well, when we're talking about being suggestive, it literally means that the sight of food, the sound of food being prepared, the smell of food, the presence of food around can oftentimes confuse us and trick us into thinking that we're hungry when we're really not. So you may find yourself feeling as if you're hungry when you're watching a cooking show or you're preparing a meal and handling food. You're shopping at the grocery store. You're, exposed to advertising on television or in print media, that kind of thing. So we are kind of like Pavlov's dogs, right? You remember that when we were kids,
Yes.
where, we might smell food or see food and all of a sudden we're drooling and, I must be hungry.
Yeah.
No, we've made an association, so part of what we do is help to tease away at that so we can understand what our triggers are or the things that activate us and result in us eating when we're not really hungry.
Yeah, it seems like eating is a cultural thing a lot, or how you grew up in your family. And I don't know if it's more prominent in America, maybe because the food's not very healthy here a lot of the times, but my kids grew up and everything revolved around food because of my ex-husband. So they had to learn. Now they all eat really, really healthy because everything they were eating was making them unhealthy. So they all had to learn to eat healthy, which is very, very interesting. But I just can't eat if I'm not hungry. It really doesn't matter. So I don't know why. I've just never been able to. So
well, food is like very much a connector, right? And cultures all over the world connect through food. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. Food can be something that connects people either through celebration, through grief, through holidays and special occasions, or just like through family connections that are taking place over meals. So this program really helps you understand, like, am I really hungry when I'm in these environments, or is it just the presence of food that is causing me to want to eat or maybe even overeat,
Right.
Yeah.
So we address those things. And I love that, you're like, yeah, I don't want to eat when I'm not hungry. That just tells me that you kind of have this instinctive knowingness around when your body is hungry. And that's very much aligned with mindful eating.
Oh, that's good. Well, good then. Maybe this won't be as bad.
Mhm.
So why is the starting point we ask ourselves, why are we eating? Is it because we're hungry or because of what time it is or because we just feel like it? Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, the why we eat could be any number of reasons. When we are within the mindful eating paradigm, we really want to start by asking ourselves, am I even hungry in the first place when we have the urge to eat? Otherwise, we might be eating because we are bored, because of the time of day, because we just feel like it. Maybe it's because we're sad or upset or angry or stressed or, any number of reasons. So we teach people to really check in, to pause when they have the urge to eat rather than just reaching for food, to pause and check in. Am I even really hungry in the first place? And believe it or not, that one thing, if that's the only thing you take away from this, it can change a lot, because if you're not taking a moment to check in, then you're just in your habits and, you're just reacting.
Going through the motion.
Yeah. Mindful eating gives us an opportunity to pause, breathe, check in with our bodies, to make that body mind connection, and then to understand the actual physical symptoms of hunger in the body, and then what non-hunger cues for eating feel like and how to address those.
Mm. So then the next question is, when are we having physical signs of hunger? Yeah, can you explain some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So physical signs and symptoms of hunger come from two places. One is the blood sugar levels in our body will lower, it'll go down. So we eat food, blood sugar goes up, insulin gets released, and then eventually manages and helps assimilate the food so that we can nourish our bodies. But then eventually our blood sugar levels will drop. And then when we experience that, we might feel dizzy. We might feel a little confusion. We might feel a little irritable. We might feel shaky. We might even feel like hangry, where we just need food and we need it right now, that kind of a situation. So when our blood sugar crashes, those are some of the sensations that we feel. The other place is our stomach. So our stomach is kind of like a balloon. It's about the size of your fist. It sits just below your rib cage, slightly to the left. So when it's empty, it's the size of your fist. So think of an empty balloon, but it's constantly doing its job of breaking down food. So it's constantly trying to digest food. Now, when there's no food in the stomach, it continues to do that. And so we can have sensations like hunger pangs or growling in the stomach. We can have a gnawing feeling. We can have a feeling of like an emptiness or a hollow feeling. We might even feel nauseated because the digestive juices are there, but they're not breaking anything down and they're just churning around in our stomach. So that's the other place that we can experience the sensations of hunger. And so in mindful eating, we teach you how to identify the actual physical symptoms and signs of hunger in the body. And then we also talk about, like I said, some of the ones that are not coming from hunger and how to address those. But we use a body, mind, heart scan to really check in fully with our body, our mind, our emotions, what's going on, because believe it or not, our thoughts can impact whether or not we decide to eat. Our emotions certainly can, because a lot of times we might be eating for emotional reasons. So we're checking in and kind of taking inventory to determine, do I actually have the physical signs and symptoms of hunger?
Yeah, and I noticed when my kids were little and I was home more during the day, I would snack for no reason. But then I think about the snacks I was eating and they had no nutritional value. So then I never felt full. So then I just kept eating them. That can probably be a problem too. If you're not getting the nutrients you need, your body's still going to want more food until it gets the nutrients. I've heard that before. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, definitely. There's a balance, like I said, of eating for nourishment and eating for pleasure. And we may not feel satisfied or full at the end of a meal, even if we had enough volume, right, to fill the stomach. That doesn't mean we're going to feel satisfied at the end of the meal if it's not the food that is what we're needing in the moment. And so we also talk about, what do I want? What do I need? And then what do I have available? And we use a term called balance, variety, and moderation, where all food fits in this model. And we're identifying, what are our nutritional needs that need to be addressed? Are there special considerations I need to take into consideration around this? But also addressing what do I want? Because here's the thing, you guys, if there's something we really, really, really want, we eventually will end up eating it. And now we're more likely to overeat. So we just add that into the equation. Like, okay, we're going to check in on what I want, what I need, and then what are the choices available to me that then will fit into those parameters so that we feel satisfied at the end of the meal and we don't accidentally overeat.
Yeah. And I have a couple friends that have nonprofits that work in human trafficking. And they said that a lot of the women that get out of human trafficking will end up getting heavier. And I noticed when I was abused in my marriage, I felt more comfortable with more weight on. So
it's very common.
And I don't know if I was
almost like a protective,
Yeah.
protect yourself.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why I think this podcast is really, really important for our listeners too, because I think there was a comfort in not having any attention from any other men because I would, get abused if I did. So
some of it, I think, also is for emotional comfort.
Yeah.
A lot of times people are eating because it's comforting them in some way. And maybe, it's like we have this void, when we've been through trauma, we know that there's that piece of us that hasn't been properly nourished and cared for. And so sometimes we use other kinds of coping strategies to, accomplish that might lead us and might not be the best choices for us, but we're doing the best we can with what we have until we know better and until we learn other strategies and gain other tools that will then help us.
Yeah, I know you recommended a book during the yoga teacher training and I bought it. I think it was called Buried Feelings Never Die. Is that the name of it?
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean,
feelings buried alive never die.
Yeah.
Great book.
And I like that because like if you're using food and you're not really feeling your feelings because you're trying to avoid that, you're really, it's not going to heal you. I mean, it's like a double whammy because then you're eating when you're not hungry, but you're also stepping down your feelings. So that makes sense.
Yeah. The next question is what? You say we can judge ourselves when we label food as bad. Can you expound on that?
Absolutely. So we are bombarded with good food, bad food messaging all over the place. We live in a diet culture. And by the way, the definition of good and bad changes all the time. It's very confusing. And depending on the diet or the program that you're looking at, what is good in one program might be considered bad in another. So it's very, very confusing. The problem is when we identify food as good and bad, we start to then label ourselves as good or bad when we eat the so-called bad food. So we hear this all the time. People, who've been on and off of diets or have been in a restrictive mindset for a long period of time, they'll say, oh, I was bad today. I ate a Snickers. Does a Snickers make you bad? Does that make you a bad person?
No.
No. And so we have to stop defining our worth and our value based on what we ate or didn't eat. By the way, that information is subjective. That's changing all the time. It's very confusing. Even nutritionists don't agree upon it. So we have to level the playing field. And there's a whole other school of psychology that looks at deprivation, the psychology of deprivation. When we tell ourselves that we can't have something or something is bad, we actually crave it more. We desire it more. It strengthens the cravings. And it then increases the likelihood that when we do have it, we'll overeat it. So we put food on an even playing field and it's just food. It's just food.
And we
right?
go like feast or famine mode, like,
Yeah, exactly. So we then, like I was telling you, start to determine what to eat based on what do I want? What do I need? What do I have? Looking at balance, variety and moderation. So balance, eating a variety of different foods with lots of different nutritional profiles, incorporating variety into our diet, incorporating moderation into our diet. And believe it or not, we know more nutritional information than we really need to know. It actually confuses us more than it helps sometimes. So it's kind of rolling back to some of the basics and really letting our body determine what we need and want, and then going from there. And then recognizing that can change depending on where we're at day to day in our lives, what activities we're engaged in, whether or not we went hiking, whether or not we drank enough water, whether or not, it can change, and being flexible with that.
That's good.
Yeah.
So then the next question is how. This is calling our attention to mindful eating and not multitasking, which I think we all try to do. We're like trying to do two things at once, during lunchtime.
Yeah.
For me, I have a 30-minute lunch. So I'm always like trying to get an appointment done or something. So anything you want to add to that about being distracted when we're eating?
Absolutely. And I just chuckled because I used to think I was the greatest multitasker ever. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so great at multitasking. And then I went through this program and really realized, no, the brain can only focus on one thing at a time. It can only focus on one thing at a time. So we're really good at maybe switching tasks, right?
Yeah.
So we're focusing on one thing, then another, which really kind of makes us a little bit more ADD than anything else. But the reality is that if we are doing multiple things, we are not doing any of them very well. That's just the reality of things. So I'm going to share a story with you that I share with my mindful eating clients and students. And this is me throwing myself under the bus. Okay. So I did, back when my daughter was 8, she's 24 now. I did a mindful eating. Well, it was actually a mother-daughter retreat that a friend of mine facilitated. And she brought me in as one of the mindful eating facilitators to really, just teach about mindful eating. But as part of the retreat, we had this activity where we each had to perform without words something that bothered us about the other person. Okay. So you'll see how this all connects. So I, at the time, and I've been self-employed since 1999. Okay. So my work sometimes bleeds into home. I'm, working from home and that sort of thing. So my daughter sits down and she is pretending she's typing at a laptop. She's pretending to be me. And she is literally like keeps looking over her shoulder and putting her finger up 1 more minute, typing away, putting her finger up 1 more minute, typing away. This is me like going, honey, give me another minute. Give me another minute. Hold on. I'm finishing something. Right. But it made me realize, oh my goodness, here's me like, hold on, Hannah, give me a second. I'm doing this. And I'm like trying to like multitask and hold on. So I realized that I was lacking mindfulness. Here I am, a mindful eating facilitator and coach coming in to teach this. And I'm being called out on not being mindful.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was like an awakening.
It was very eye-opening. And what I realized is how we do anything is how we do everything. I'm going to say it again. How we do anything is how we do everything. So I thought I was being mindful. I thought I was using these principles. And what I realized is, oh my goodness, I really need to be more mindful and more present in every area of my life, with my parenting, with my work, with, and not let everything kind of bleed over, which can happen, especially if you're self-employed and working from home. So all that to say is that when we teach mindful eating, we're helping people really be present and focus on eating so that they get more pleasure and satisfaction out of it. And they're less likely to overeat because they are paying attention to the signals their body is sending them while they're eating, which then will help them know when to stop eating, when the body is getting full. So we use lots of different strategies like putting the fork down. Part of the reason why we put the fork down is not just to slow us down, but it's also to recognize that if I have a bite of food in my mouth that I'm chewing and I am putting a forkful on my fork at the same time, which bite am I thinking about?
The next bite that you're going to be eating.
The next bite.
Yeah.
And the next bite. And the next bite. So you are never present or noticing the bite that is actually in your mouth. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that and removing distractions, creating a pleasurable environment, which helps our body digest food better because we have two different sides to our nervous system. We have our fight or flight side of our nervous system when we're stressed and busy, right? And then we have our rest and digest nervous system, which is the side of nervous system we want to be in while we're eating and digesting food. So if we're like working while we're eating, then we are far more likely to be in the other side of our nervous system and not even digesting the food well or effectively. And we might end up with gastric upset and, excuse my language, gas and bloating and all the things, right?
Yeah.
But we have a lot of different tools and strategies that help people focus, be present, and really increase their enjoyment and satisfaction from eating and lower the chances of them overeating because they're connected to their body and paying attention while they eat.
Yeah,
I didn't realize
helpful.
we were supposed to enjoy eating as we're talking about this.
That makes me sad for you, Brenda, because I'm a foodie. I love food now.
Yeah.
And I used to have a love-hate relationship with food. I don't anymore. I fully enjoy eating. That doesn't mean that there aren't.
To be continued. Stay tuned for next week's part 2. You don't want to miss it.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.